Oh.
I'll give you the.
Okay, I think you should go. Department. And yeah, there we go. There we go. That's our logo. It was created with the original branding and image development workshops that we did a number of years ago. And it's a hand of art creation and welcoming. So happy to have you all here today. I'm going to go through a presentation, and at the end we'll have time for questions and answers. So the Arts and Cultural District statutory language was created in 2007. It was to establish a state-authorized program to be able to work with communities that had existing arts and cultural and creative economy assets that they wanted to further develop and enhance to grow their local economies. The statute established the Main Street Director as the state coordinator. The Arts Commission underneath New Mexico Arts in the Department of Cultural Affairs is the state authorizing body. Communities over 50,000 in population can municipally designate, and I believe the wisdom of the legislature at that time was that those communities that were over 50,000 usually had their own cultural affairs departments, planning departments, arts, public art programs, had a variety of resources that our smaller communities did not have access to. So they created a municipal designating pathway for those communities over 50,000. So this program is open to communities under 50,000, and for those communities that municipally designate and complete the statutory responsibilities and the policy that we have adopted for our communities that want to become state authorized that are municipally designated, those that follow that pathway, we will entertain a letter from them for state authorization. The legislation also created arts and cultural compounds. We have currently 7 active arts and cultural districts and 1 compound, which is Mora, New Mexico. The distinction for compounds is that most of our compounds do not have the larger set of resources normally associated with an arts and cultural district, such as hotels, larger restaurants, places to stay overnight. They just don't have the density. A compound could be something like Los Luceros out in the Espanola Valley, a historic Spanish compound, to an area where Mora has a religious compound, along with a number of granaries, spinning mills, and interesting cultural assets that they want to continue to support. Institutions are those areas where a institution may stand alone from an arts and cultural district, and people would like to include an outlier kind of museum or cultural center that's not in the district proper. So an institution can ask for designation. We have no institutions at this point, but an institution might be something like the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, the WPA buildings on the state fairgrounds, the Hispanic Cultural Center. Those are all kind of institutional entities. Acoma Pueblos Museum and Visitor Center. So there are a variety of ways in which you can come into the program. The statutory language also created a requirement that all programs minimally report annually to the New Mexico Arts Commission. We actually require twice a year, and that presentation is done to the New Mexico Arts Commission. Meets 4 times a year. We usually do the winter program for their meeting to be able to present at that. So that's something that you compile. We have a variety of performance measures in areas that we want you to track. So what is an ACD? Defined by New Mexico State Statute. And this is the actual language of the statute. If you haven't had a chance to read the statute, it should be up on our website under our resources section. It's much more involved than this, but these are the areas that I pulled out that I thought were most important for you to know if you're looking at creating a arts and cultural district. This does not relate necessarily to the institutions or compounds. It must be in a geographically contiguous area that ranges in size from a portion of a municipality, excuse me, to a regional district with a special coherence. It is distinguished by physical and cultural resources that play a vital role in the life and development, including economic and cultural development of a community. It focuses on a cultural compound, a major art institution, art and entertainment business, an area with arts and cultural activities, or cultural and artisan production. And it should be engaged in the promotion, preservation, and educational aspects of the arts and culture of that locale, and contribute to the public through interpretive, educational, and recreational uses. So the benefits that were provided by the state statute, and there are a number of them that eventually we would like to add to the, amend to the statute, but these are the ones that exist now. Doubling of state historic tax credits within the Arts and Cultural District boundary. The Local Economic Development Act was amended when this, the ACD Act was adopted in 2007 to include cultural facilities as a qualifying entity and eligible for ALIDA public-private partnership funding. And that's whether you're looking at the Local Economic Development Act's funding formulas for the state or for your local ordinances if you adopt the LEAD Act. And most of you have the LEAD Act adopted in your communities. And that's an important distinction because you can now fund cultural facilities, cultural institutions, arts organizations, live, work, housing. There's a whole variety of things that are listed under that cultural facilities to help you grow your cultural economy. And finally, arts and cultural resources fund in Department of Cultural Affairs. And unfortunately, this has never been funded. It's never been capitalized by the legislature. They created the fund and never funded it. So from time to time, we have used our own Main Street capital outlay to help support some of the activities and some of the work of the ACD. Cultural facility. So here's a little bit more on the LEADA, statutory language. A cultural facility means a facility that is owned by the state, a county or a municipality, or a qualifying entity. That could be an arts organization that serves the public through preserving, educating, and promoting the arts and culture of a particular locale, including theaters, museums, libraries, galleries, compounds, educational organizations, performing arts, venues and organizations, studios and media laboratories, and live, work, housing facilities. So just to give you a couple quick examples of where we've been using this is historic theaters, where it's economically viable to restore a theater and get fixed assets such as digital film projection into those theaters. The department has been putting some of its money into it. Another one is brew pubs, which is considered, if you're brewing, it's a production activity. So it would qualify under this, and we've been providing some resources for purchasing the fixed assets, the actual equipment to do some of the brew activities. There are a whole lot more that we haven't pushed the envelope on, and I certainly hope if you come on board, you'll find some interesting ways to work with us in terms of bringing that resource to your community and your businesses. So Arts and Cultural District policy changes. When we jumped in our first year with our pilot programs in 2008, we quickly realized that the language was cobbled together at the last minute, and there are some conflicting areas, as well as the use of certain language back and forth meaning different things. And we tried 3 different years to get in and change it, amend it, and every year it got through all the committees just fine. There wasn't any problem there, but it got hung up like 1,500 other bills at the last day, and we didn't get it through each time. So we finally gave up and decided to rework the problems with the existing statutory language by policy. And the legal attorneys from the governor's office, this office, Economic Development, and New Mexico Arts, working through DCA, worked with us. It took us about a year to complete those changes. So those policies are available. You should know that we created an Arts and Cultural District Council, which is not part of the statutory language, because I couldn't do it alone, quite simply. Main Street couldn't drive this. And we really liked that there was a combination of New Mexico Arts and Arts Commission with Main Street. It was a good marriage of the 2 programs to bring together creative economy work. And we brought in, at that time, the Historic Preservation Division, which is still active, New Mexico Tourism, New Mexico Museum Foundation, which is no longer active, the Humanities Council, which was for a while, I had to pull out. They're looking at coming back in, and the McKean Charitable Trust. That creates the state council. They review applications, give guidance to me. I then make recommendations to the New Mexico Arts Commission. The state policies that were adopted, and again, you can find this on the website, what an ACD startup process is. If you get accepted into this program, you're a startup community until you get all the statutory responsibilities that we have set up by policy or statute completed. It usually takes about 2 years, but some communities are ahead of others, and some have taken a lot less time to get through and become a full arts and cultural district program, which then they could start taking advantage of the benefits. You know, when we talked about benefits, I don't think we talked about doubling of state historic tax credits. Can you go back to that slide? Go back to, that's forward. There we go. One more. One more. Oh, benefits. There we go. So there is a benefits missing here. No, we didn't talk about it. Doubling of state historic tax credits within an arts cultural district boundary. This is for historic preservation purposes. I'm sorry to jump you back to slide 5, but I think that's an important one because you have a lot of historic buildings and assets, and for small property owners to be able to make restoration of buildings financially viable, they often have to go for tax credits to be able to finance the restoration of a building. And so that doubling of tax credits actually created a great tool for preservation work within the arts and cultural district. Thank you, Anna, and helping go forward. Sorry about that, guys. I got lost in my own talk.
Ahead now.
So
there you go. Okay, so
these are, I don't think we got through all the state policies.
Okay.
Let's go back more. So arts and cultural district boundaries, we defined that more tightly, so it's more clear. Declassification of local arts and cultural district organizations when an organization no longer performs, how a declassification takes place based on statutory language, but fleshed out a little bit more in terms of giving a local organization time to be able to get back into compliance. We don't like just booting people out. More definitions around what a cultural compound in an institution looks like than the statutory language actually indicated, to help flesh that out further. Municipally designated programs, there's no way in the statutory language for a municipally designated program to become state authorized. It was assumed that they would. So we fleshed out what the policy was for that so that there was a clear way, clear pathway, and there are 2 communities looking at that right now, working on it. I suspect our first community coming in from municipally designated will be this spring, and that'll probably be Las Cruces. And then policies, where you can find them is in our Arts and Cultural District section of the Economic Development Department's website. And by the way, we will make this PowerPoint available later today on our own website. And that way you can have the PowerPoint, you'll have the application, there's actually an introduction and background narrative that this is just skimming the surface of. It's a pretty detailed history of the program, and you're welcome to peruse that at your own convenience. So here's some additional resources that we've produced over the years to help guide you in your work. One is a cultural planner guide. What we usually do is fund a cultural economic development plan for your arts and cultural district. If you have a master plan or a metropolitan redevelopment plan, if you're a Main Street district, those things usually exist already. This adds the cultural component, the arts and cultural component to that plan. And we usually are able to pull the funding resources to help you pay for that. ACD marketing guidelines. So we actually invested in both marketing guidelines and image and branding manuals to help guide the development visually of how you move your cultural district forward in terms of letting people know about it, whether it's your visitors, your community, or tourists. And we did create a unified brand with the communities in 2008, I believe it was, that you saw at the beginning of this webinar. So changes in cultural arts, creative, and entertainment economy. And these are some of the changes that have occurred in the years since this program was created. there are some really big changes within the national environment. We were one of the first states to get out the door with this program. Other states have now adopted it. I don't remember how many. I think there's 19 or 20 now. Over 700 or 800 local communities have their own creative economy programs, arts and cultural district programs. So that's one big change. We've not had a chance to really move too much forward because of the lack of funding. Then creative placemaking came in. Both the NEA and America for the Arts have been pushing very heavily for creative placemaking inside of districts, inside of any arts areas. So not just arts and cultural districts, but that's a phenomena and a planning and implementation process that we've even integrated into our Main Street programs. The creative economy research done by UNM Beaver, and they did 2 citywide reports first, and then the Department of Cultural Affairs contracted the University of Mexico's Bureau of Business and Economic Research to do that, to look at it statewide, to get a better sense of what was happening statewide in terms of cultural impact. And they looked at it by cities, they looked at it by region, they looked at it by overall state, where there were gaps in creative economy industries sectors, where there are opportunities for cultural and arts entrepreneurs, areas that the state is not making enough investment or our local organizations and communities aren't taking advantage of, that could actually help grow the creative economy, create additional entrepreneurial activity, additional business growth, and creative industries and creative enterprises, which the best examples I usually give for what is a creative industry or enterprise is you think of Syzygy Tile, which is located in downtown Main Street, Silver City, and they manufacture tile that's exported around other states and actually out of the country. A second one is the Mora Valley Spinning Mill at Tepetes de la Diana, and they actually have a pull of over 100 miles from people who are wool producers, and they spin the mill and mill the wool and dye it. They can do all kinds of things. They service over 100 miles radius in that area, and it's critical because it produces 13 full-time jobs in the Mora Valley, sustainable good jobs. So those kinds of creative industries, if you have whole warehouse districts, large buildings that need to be adaptive reuses, there are a lot of people in creative and cultural economy, from agricultural to technology to innovation, that are looking for ways to open up a small business, probably 2 or 3 employees. And that, in my mind, is more the creative enterprises that most of our communities do. But you also get large innovation areas, such as the Innovation District in downtown Albuquerque, which is part of their Arts and Cultural District, which actually is a huge facility for innovation, creativity, and the development of not only new resources, but the educational and skill building for young people who want to become entrepreneurs within innovation and technology. So, economic transformation strategies was a big change for Main Street. The ACDs had been languoring the last couple of years because we didn't have funding. We spent among our Main Street team talking about we need to really reposition ourselves in terms of the work that we're doing. We've been doing this now for 34 years. We're heading into our 35th. How do we talk about and how do we implement the kinds of technical assistance and work to all our programs that we have underneath the New Mexico Main Street umbrella? We also do arts and cultural districts. We do the Frontier Communities Initiative, and we do the Historic Theaters Initiative. And we really wanted something that was all embracing, that was strategically driven and goal driven. So these became our 3 areas that the Main Street team has adopted, and it applies to our arts and cultural districts as well as to our Main Street programs. It's building capacity for local economic revitalization and redevelopment. For arts and cultural districts, it's going to be arts, culture, or creative economy, or a combination of one of those. The second one is enhancing the entrepreneurial and creative economy. We heard clearly from legislators last year, and I think Main Street's always done this, and I think our ACDs too, is there are 2 areas. They want to make sure that businesses are sustained, that we really take care of businesses that already exist, and that we help them expand or grow their market capabilities. And the second part of that one was creative economy. And that really drives us into some new areas such as creative enterprises and industries, which to date has not had much respect among a number of funders and elected officials who basically see arts as a group of poor artists who are got their hands out looking for money all the time. And that's how arts and cultural districts often gets poorly defined. And we're trying to transform that so that people understand how important the economic impacts are of arts, culture, and the creative economy to employment, job opportunity, business development in this state. And we feel, many of us, that we give lip service to it, but we don't really make the investments necessary to really build that out. And then the final one is create thriving communities, and that's about placemaking. It's really about creating places where people want to gather and be. And so it can involve buildings, it can involve pocket parks, it can involve public art, private art, art that's engaging the street, art that's engaging pedestrians. There's many, many variations on that. So those are important guideposts now for us in Main Street as we move forward with the Arts and Cultural District program. So additionally, we decided to invest in a new creative economy consultant. We thought this was important if we're going to make a commitment to growing the creative economy, arts and cultural districts, and arts and creative economy work in all our programs. We really needed somebody to work with us. And we hired Jillian Joyce, who was one of the co-authors to that Bureau of Business and Economic Research study. She'll be starting in a couple weeks and begin working with us with our arts and cultural districts, particularly after some of you have been around for a while. You know, we lost Charlie Deans and Elmo Baca, both got to the point where they decided to retire. And so we were missing people who actually were quite engaged in the beginning of the Arts and Cultural District program, and we needed to be able to find people who could bring some continuity to that work. So Julian will be working with our Arts and Cultural Districts, our frontier communities, our historic theaters, our Main Street, our Great Blocks programs, our Building Creative Communities Conference. And for the last 2 years, we have not been able to produce the Building Creative Communities Conference because of the budget cuts, because of the revenue shortfall in state government. We're bringing that back. That's something that we felt was an incredibly interactive and dynamic conference that nobody else does. We've got infrastructure conferences that talk about water and roads and engineering. We've got municipal league conferences that serve our municipal officials, administrators. The county produces something. There's a county, statewide county conference every year for elected officials and administrators for counties. But we really didn't have anything for arts, historic preservation, revitalization, redevelopment. So we really brought together a conference that had about 250 people the first 2 years that we produced it, and we'll be bringing that back next year, and you'll hear more about that in the future. So the application. If you haven't read the background narrative, I'd highly encourage you to do that. I know there's a lot of stuff in there, but I think it'll introduce you better than just this quick webinar. You'll see some of the same things that I've been talking about today. But I think it's important to be able to take a look at where we've been and where we're going. If you haven't done so, also read the application. You want to get into what it's actually looking for. It is substantially changed from previous years. The eligibility criteria has changed, creative enterprises and industries has changed, creative placemaking and innovation, things we had just talked about, are all part of now that application. The application is a self-assessment. And I would highly recommend, if you don't have an organized group already, that you put together an organized group of stakeholders. And stakeholders, I mean artists, arts organizations, cultural institutions, cultural facilities, city or county government, whatever entity, tribal government, if you're a Native American community. I think those are all critical elements in terms of having the conversation before you fill out an application, because what we're going to be looking for in the review process is the amount of public activity that has occurred prior to submitting the application, to understand that there's strong buy-in across multiple different groups of people to make this a successful application, and then a successful program. So ACD application, the self-assessment tool, there's types of assets within the proposed area that you want to develop as an arts and cultural district. We don't create a cultural creative economy. It already exists and you want to build out on it. It's a mistake some people make when they've applied it, when we've had past rounds, that they think we can come in and create an arts and cultural environment or create a place where arts and culture happen, or that we can attract cultural entrepreneurs and artists where none exist now, or very few. So you're building on an existing set of assets, and that'll vary from community to community. We realize the scale of communities applying can be very, very small communities of several hundred people to communities of 20, 50, up to 50,000. So your scale of the amount of assets that you have, we'll be watching that. We're not going to compare a Carrizozo to a Las Cruces. That would be unfair in terms of the scale and proportion of facilities and activities. Framing your current arts and cultural district market position. It's real important that you identify where you are today with your economic market position. What's your current analysis of how you see what is occurring within your existing area that you're proposing to become an arts and cultural district? Because we have to build off of something. We have to understand what's underperforming, where the gaps are, where the opportunities are, where the expansion opportunities are, what areas can we work in. To give you an example, Silver City has a vibrant arts gallery district, arts and entrepreneurial work. They had, when they first came in, 3 theaters that were either vacant or underutilized. And they decided to add a theaters district while not abandoning. They continue to support their arts entrepreneurs and arts and cultural district people, but they wanted to add a theater component, and they had 3 theaters. That's an asset that's not being used. They now have 2 after they were one of our pilot programs. They now have 2 of those theaters reopened. One as a movie theater performance area, and the other one, and community gathering place, and the other one as performance and arts area. The third one still has not been bought. It's still in the private sector. So they've accomplished 2/3 of their goal in terms of adding a theater environment where theater arts could also be cultivated within their arts and cultural district. So specially designed, these are areas that we need to see in terms of that market position. So we're going to need to know what redevelopment tools and plans are already in place, and it lists them. Your self-evaluation has long lists to check off of, and the number of some of these things. Don't worry if you don't have some things, don't fudge it. This is within your district. Any specially designated overlay zones. Some of your communities have already developed revitalization zones, Main Street districts, community development districts, business improvement districts, historic overlay zones that have been dedicated and officially set up as a zoning tool to protect historic sites, those kinds of things. It helps us to know what's already in place and what we may need to work on as a state program if you're accepted into the Startup ACD program. What you see is opportunity sites, where you see additional activity that could be happening, cultural development, cultural activities, cultural businesses, cultural enterprises. And finally, your human, social, and financial capital. What are the things that you're going to bring to the table in this partnership? Because this is a partnership program. All of our New Mexico Main Street programs underneath our New Mexico Main Street umbrella are public-private partnership programs. It takes both your governmental entity, whatever that local major governmental entity is, and a local nonprofit organization or a nonprofit organization that is willing to house an ACD. So this helps you frame, these asset inventories helps you frame your economic market vision statement, what you want to develop in 5 years, what you will look at specifically, what will be different about that district or that compound or that institutional area. So 5 years, what do you want to achieve? What will frame your creative arts and cultural strategies? And this is part of your narrative work, and this should be based out of your assets that you've just identified, all those long lists of things. What do you want to enhance and grow? What is it the purpose of this organization going to be, and how are we going to partner with you? What do you want to achieve economically? Because these are economic programs. We're housed in the Economic Development Department. And what specific challenges will you tackle in the next 5 years? And finally, for all our programs, return on investment is critical. Legislature, which funds these programs, wants to know what the return on investment is. So what are your outcomes? And what are your performance measures? How do you know that you've achieved what you set out to do? And if you haven't achieved it, why not? And how do you reposition your work? So here's what an arts and cultural district development wheel looks like. These are the 4 components that you'll be working in if you're accepted into the program. Cultural planning and development. That's all working with cultural entrepreneurs, cultural activities, creative economy, cultural tourism, historic preservation, all those different elements. Physical planning and development. If you're not a Main Street district, you're going to be taking on some major physical improvements to the district area. And that can be from the street itself to particular buildings, to planning documents, to beautification, to physical spaces, theaters, plazas, studios, galleries, all that kind of stuff. Capacity and sustainability. We're constantly investing. We'll be there to invest with you, our state coordinating council, to help you build out your leadership, your organizational structure, your volunteers and staff, your project coordination, your organizational planning, all these different pieces of the puzzle to help build your skills and knowledge and capacity to take on ever more increasingly complex projects. So you're going to have some small projects in the beginning and more complex projects that take longer to do and longer to realize. And then finally, branding and marketing. What's your image? What's the branding? What's the organizational branding, which is different from district branding? The kinds of cultural events, how do you market those? Promotions, destinational development. And we do like to see a signature event within 3 years developed. So the signature events, some really solid ones that you can take a look at, is the science and innovation work done up at Los Alamos. They have an incredible science fest. It's just out of this world. And then they have the Clay Festival down in Silver City, and Red Dirt, Black Gold, which trades off the oil basin, oil industries down in Artesia, which has an arts and cultural district. And they've got one of these incredibly phenomenal interpretations. Red dirt is the dirt of the area, and black gold is the oil. And so these are innovative, and they're based in the unique characteristics of each of these districts. And they've taken a while to develop those. They're all off the ground, very, very successful programs. Application components. So eligibility to apply, attendance within the past 2 years in an ACD meeting. If you haven't been to, we have semi-annual meetings. We missed one this year. Our next one's January 31st. It's not too late to attend if you decide to apply. You've not been to one in the last 2 years, you do need to come to that Arts and Cultural District meeting. And our whole workshop for that 3 days, the Arts and Cultural District specifically on the 31st, but it's our quarterly leadership network meeting at La Fonda in Santa Fe, and that'll be focused on the creative economy this year. So it gives you a chance to really focus in on some additional skill building, knowledge building about how to do arts and cultural development work. The next eligibility is if you have a Main Street organization dedicated to creative and cultural economy, the Main Street organization itself can apply, and it would set up a 5th standing committee. Within the Main Street program, Main Street has 4 standing committees. This would be a 5th one to focus in creative and cultural economy. The other one is an existing creative or cultural economy organization, a 501c3 already organized, and it has a current record of active performance. It's not something that somebody grabbed that's been sitting dormant for 5 years. We have a lot of 501c3s that aren't active, and you can't just grab one and use that. We really want to see what the activity of that organization has been and how we can further build on that. For us, it's building capacity on something. The less we have to start up, the less problems there are in terms of constantly shifting people who have good intentions but really didn't realize how much work it is to set up a C3 organization and get that startup process moving forward. So minimum composition of a steering committee, and you need a steering committee to drive this. You cannot be an individual applying for something. You should have a local regional arts council. You should have a Main Street organization or a CDC or a chamber, somebody who's a partner in this business that does the economic development side of work. Your local government, and there actually requires a resolution of support from your local government, and that's in the application packet and the background and narrative that's on the website. We'll talk about that in a minute. Other creative and cultural organizations and institutions. You might have a historic preservation society. You may have a museum. You may have other institutions that are dedicated to arts and cultural development. And this is both public and private sector. So asset mapping, one of the things we ask you to do is another checklist of what you actually have in terms of your assets that support the development of the arts and cultural district, that bring people into it. Because we're really trying to generate activity within the district with the arts and cultural district program. So what are your cultural assets? What are your creative and cultural organizations? Who are the creative and cultural facilities and institutions in your proposed area that you want to work in? The historic and cultural property assets, the hospitality, visitor, and tourism resources, and what other support services might exist that we should know about before making a judgment about reviewing an application and deciding, because we only have a limited amount of money. These applications are competitive, and not all who apply will necessarily get in this year. They may get in next year. So you want to really draft a competitive application. So types of ACDs, ACD District Foundation, what kind of sets up the kind of development that you need to do? So you want to think a little bit about types of ACDs, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And a planning document inventory. So we want to know how you've planned. What are the basic foundational ingredients that you're bringing together to create this district area? And then maps of the proposed area. We really need to see some visual maps. And sometimes some folks have multiple different kinds of boundary maps. They have a Main Street district, they have a metropolitan redevelopment area, they have a historic planning district area, they have a bid district area. Helping us to have those as overlays, or having it on one document that's clearly identified with the boundaries, so we can understand where the street boundaries are for the area that you're proposing to do this work in. And here are the types of community support groups that you really want to take a look at. So a community and organizational support. Who are the different organizations that are going to come in and work with you on this? And how broad community support do you have? And have you had meetings prior to submitting the application to talk about an arts and cultural district and how the community itself might feel about that? Records of organizational collaboration. How have different organizations participated together? Are you all seeing your downtown areas, your traditional areas that you're trying to build out, a compound or an institution? Have there been collaborative efforts in the past to work together to kind of develop and promote and build out that district in the past, and how people work together? Existing marketing and promotion efforts. What kinds of things you're already doing for tourism marketing, destinational marketing? There are a variety of areas there. So if you're already working in this, you have websites set up, e-newsletters, things that are already happening, even though it may not be specifically targeted to the district, but support a regional effort. Those are the kinds of things you want to see where we can help you build out additionally for this arts and cultural district area or compound or institution. And then what are your target clients and customers for your proposed district area? Who do you actually want to attract in? Is it just residents? Do you want visitors? Why do you want visitors? Tourists? Why would tourists be there? Why will they stay? What are the assets that support tourism development? So if you're being able to follow this with me now, and I know I'm going pretty fast, there's some logical sequence to this in terms of identifying your assets, identifying aspirationally what you want to become, identifying economically what you want to become, and all these things should begin to tie together. So creative economy growth. And these are the components of growing your creative or cultural or arts economies. So that market position I've mentioned before, what's your vision? Do you have a niche that you really want to fill? Because there may be multiple arts areas, arts destinational areas. So what makes your niche unique? Arts, cultural, creative, economic, transformational goals. What do you actually want to transform? What are the things, the positive things that you want to achieve that transforms things positively? Developing and sustaining your organization to meet your goals. It's critical, and it's really tough these days to bring operational money in. Project money we can find. The operational money is really critical to be able to have paid staff. You need 30 hours paid minimum a week, and you're going to need operational costs, housing of your organization, meeting spaces, equipment, all those kinds of things. Some of it costs. Sometimes you can get some of these things donated, but you need to think through what is the areas that you're going to generate revenue in, and how are you going to create a budget to support the operations of the program. Local government revenue generation and support. Very critical to all our public-private programs. We do need to see skin in the game from your local government entity. And then the composition of your proposed ACD Coordinating Council. The steering committee in your application will evolve into a coordinating council, a more formal organization, whether you're housed within an existing organization or you're creating a separate standalone 501c3 organization. So you do want to think about how do you maintain that coordinating council. One of the best coordinating councils I've seen is the one that's in, excuse me, Silver City. They have been meeting since they were formed in 2007 monthly. All the arts organizations get together, they calendar, share information, support each other's different events, activities, projects, programs. It's a phenomenal coordinating council. If you have a chance, do check in with them because they do some great work there. So we do need to see resolutions of support. And I mentioned the local government. We need resolutions of support from each of the steering committee members who are working with you on this application. So that means if the chamber is a part of this, if the Regional Arts Council is a part of this, if the movie house is a part of this, if the Arts Gallery Association is a part of this, any of those, we need to have an actual formal document submitted with the application. And then we highly recommend you engage your state legislators. Your state legislators like to know what you're doing in your community, that you're moving forward the creative economy. It gives you a chance to educate them, because eventually we want to get that Department of Cultural Affairs funding in place to do capital projects, capital improvements, cultural facilities. So it's important that we have legislative support for our programs, but also legislative engagement. Your state legislators are really important. They enjoy meeting their constituents, so do engage them over the next couple months. So questions. This is due January 31st. We are here with technical assistance to help you. We want to make you as successful as we possibly can. We want to engage you in any way we can. We do have limited funding. We're not sure how many programs we can add in. We know we'll add at least 2, maybe more. But we do want to make your application successful, because even if you're not in, you're probably going to want to continue to move your work forward so that you can apply another year when we have the next round of applications, we have funding to do it again. So what kinds of questions do you have?
And I think I want to get us there. Michael Bullock pointed out something with the slides. So wanted to see about the brand for the ACD. So I think it was this slide that cut out fast for everybody. So that was the district, the New Mexico Arts and Cultural District slide.
And we have provided signage in the past for light posts to demarcate your district boundaries once they're adopted, and that'll happen in the cultural plan process. And their signs are not that big white sign, they are the hand. And a number of our communities have those up.
I was going to say, there's another slide here I'll show you where Rich incorporated that graphic of the branding. And we can take other questions too. You can either type them in, or if you raise your hand, there's a hand icon that you can select, and we can see if you do have questions. Other things that are possible as well, I think as Rich touched on, if at any point as you're thinking about this or start digging into the application materials, you have a question for New Mexico Main Street, obviously reach out and contact Rich. And we will be posting both the video of the webinar as well as this webinar PDF, so you can have that for printout to reference if you need that as well.
The application is a fillable template. It does limit the amount of words you can put in, because you've got to realize there are multiple people reviewing this. Normally, they've got enough work that during the daytime, they're going to take it home to review, and you want to be careful about assembling your product before you submit it, because they're going to look for consistency, and they're going to want it, particularly if it becomes highly competitive, and I believe there are about 12 or 13 of you looking at this potential opportunity to develop a cultural district or compound or an institution. So you want to make sure you're writing to your reader. They don't need to read 5,000 words. Be concise and think about what you have to say when you get to the narrative sections, so they can understand what it is you're trying to achieve economically, culturally, and work in the creative economy and in the arts community.
Okay. At this time, we're not seeing additional questions.
No other questions? I was that good, huh?
Oh, wait, hold on.
There we go.
All right, Julie, I'm going to unmute you. This is Julie Tester. Julie, can you talk to us?
Hi there, I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
You sure can.
Okay,
and
perfect.
Go ahead and ask your question. I think you typed it in, but you might as well.
Yeah, so we are trying to figure out how we get our coordinating council put together. And we've already got a Main Street district that we're working with. And then we are the the Creative Carlsbad Arts Council 501c3. And so we're not sure who would be responsible for appointing that coordinating council. Would it be us as the Arts Council, or would it be Main Street?
It would be the Arts Council. The Arts Council would act as a steering committee, and you'd have to make a decision. We have two other organizations that have arts councils that are hosting a Main Street program. That are hosting an Arts and Cultural District program. In one, it's a subset of the organization. They have a coordinating council, like Main Street can do it as a fifth standing committee. The Arts Council has identified a coordinating council to work on this. In the other case, we have the entire Arts Council acting as the coordinating council. The biggest thing is that you want to be inclusive of the cultural facilities and institutions and organizations working within the proposed area. And our arts councils, either are local or regional, usually serve a much larger area than just the Arts and Cultural District itself. So you may want to think through the politics of that a little bit, and the logistics of that, and the technicalities of a larger arts council focusing on just the Arts and Cultural District work. You have other people outside who might want services that feel like the Arts and Cultural District is getting more resources. So we can talk about that a little more, but Julie, does that begin to answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any additional questions from attendees?
Do get on the website and take a look at what's already there from our other arts and cultural districts and compounds. They're very different kinds of organizations and very different kinds of communities and very different kinds of districts. Some are very small scale, some are very large scale, and they have very different kinds of goals. So I think if you have a chance to browse it a little bit, you'll see how diverse these programs are, and we adapt our work around that.
Hello, Esquivel. I believe I see your hand raised. Did you have a question? Are you there? All right. Never mind. Well, if you think of that question, feel free, again, to send that in to us. All right.
So we do want to assist you take a look at the applications if you haven't done so already. If you got more questions, give us a call. I know I can be sometimes hard to reach because I'm on the road quite a bit, but I'm usually back to people within 24 hours. Just don't wait until the day before the application is due. You really want to be careful about that because it's very hard sometimes for us to get back, and if it's a larger problem, it may be more complex. So go through the materials. You got questions now, happy to help you now, later. The other one is these applications are due at 2 o'clock here at the Economic Development Department on January 31st. So you do need to make sure that they're here in the office. We highly recommend using FedEx where you can track it. We don't take any responsibility if an application and the resolutions of support and the other documentary material is not with it. There's nothing we can do if it doesn't show up here. So that's the deadline. So you either want to hand deliver it or make sure that it's mailed out in an appropriate time to get up here. We sit, if you've never been to the Economic Development Department in New Mexico, we're in the South Capitol Complex. There's 5 or 6 huge buildings with multiple offices and divisions in them. If you don't get the right address on your package when you send it in, if you get lost anywhere in this building and sometimes disappear completely and other times show up 2-3 weeks late. So you really want to be careful. If you have questions about how to send that material in, do call us and we'll work with you to make sure you get it here in a timely fashion. If you're going to put that kind of time and energy into putting this application together, we want to make sure that that we have it so that we can review it and respect the time and energy you've put in.
Okay, there are not additional questions. So.
Okay. January 31st is our next ACD meeting. If you're applying, you need to be there if you haven't been to one of our programs in the last 2 years, one of our ACD meetings. We want you to meet the other network people. It's good to meet other people face-to-face who are actually doing this work. And if you have a chance, go out and visit one of our districts and talk to the people there. We have a directory of the leaders in all our communities up, and I'm sure they'd be happy to work with you as well.